Sidney Sheldon, the other side of me. At the age of 17, working as a delivery boy at Ephraim's drugstore in Chicago was the perfect job because it made it possible for me to steal enough sleeping pills to commit suicide. I was not certain exactly how many pills I would need, so I arbitrarily decided on 20, and I was careful to pocket only a few at a time so as not to arouse the suspicion of our pharmacist. I had read that whiskey and sleeping pills were a deadly combination, and I intended to mix them to make sure I would die. It was Saturday, the Saturday I had been waiting for. My parents would be away for the weekend, and my brother, Richard, was staying at a friend's. Our apartment would be deserted, so there would be no one there to interfere with my plan. At 6 o'clock, the pharmacist called out closing time. He had no idea how right he was. It was time to close out all the things that were wrong with my life. I knew it wasn't just for me, it was the whole country. The year was 1934, and America was going through a devastating crisis. The stock market had crashed, and thousands of banks had failed. Businesses were folding everywhere. More than 13 million people had lost their jobs and were desperate. Wages had plunged to as low as nickel an hour. A million vagabonds, including 2 lakh children, were roaming the country. We were in the grip of a disastrous depression. Former millionaires were committing suicide, and executives were selling apples in the streets. The most popular song was Gloomy Sunday. I had memorized some of the lyrics. Gloomy is Sunday, with shadows I spent it all. My heart and I have decided to end it all. The world was bleak, and it fit my mood perfectly. I had reached the depths of despair. I could see no rhyme or reason for my existence. I felt dislocated and lost. I was miserable and desperately longing for something that I couldn't define or name. We lived near Lake Michigan, only a few blocks from the shore, and one night I walked down there to try to calm myself. It was a windy night, and the sky was filled with clouds. I looked up and said, "If there is a God, show yourself to me." And as I stood staring at the sky, the clouds merged together, forming a huge face. There was a sudden flash of lightning that gave the face blazing eyes. I ran all the way home in a panic. I lived with my family in a small third-floor apartment in Rogers Park. The great showman, Mike Todd, said he was often broke, but he never felt poor. I, however, felt poor all the time because we were living in the demeaning kind of grinding poverty where in the freezing winter you had to keep the radiator off to save money, and you learned to turn the lights out when not in use. You squeeze the last drops out of the ketchup bottle and the last dab of toothpaste out of the tube. But I was about to escape all that. When I arrived at our dreary apartment, it was deserted. My parents had already left for a weekend, and my brother had gone. There was no one to stop me from what I intended to do. I walked into the little bedroom that Richard and I shared, and I carefully removed the bag of sleeping pills I had hidden under the dresser. Next, I went into the kitchen, took a bottle of bourbon from the shelf where my father kept it, and carried it back to the bedroom. I looked at the pills and the bourbon. and I wondered how long it would take for them to work. I poured some whiskey into a glass and raised it to my lips. I would not let Mama myself think about what I was doing. I took a swallow of the whiskey and the acrid taste of it made me choke. I picked up a handful of sleeping pills and started to raise them to my mouth when a voice said, What are you doing? I spun round and spilling some of the whiskey and dropping some of the pills. My father was standing in the bedroom doorway. He moved closer. Didn't know you drank. I looked at him stunned. I thought you were gone. I forgot something. I'll ask you again. What are you doing? He took the glass of whiskey from my hand. My mind was racing. Nothing. He was frowning. This isn't like you, Sidney. What's wrong? He says he saw the pile of sleeping pills. My God, what's going on here? What are these? No plausible lie came into my mind. I said defiantly, they are sleeping pills. Why I am going to commit suicide. There was a silence. Then my father said, I had no idea you were so unhappy. You can't stop me, because if you stop me now I'll do it tomorrow. He stood there studying me. It's your life. You can do anything you want with it. He hesitated. If you are not in too big a hurry, why don't we go for a little walk? In this corner, I would like to present the Marcus clan, two brothers, Sam and Al, and their three sisters, Pauline, Natalie, Fran. And in the opposite corner, we have the Schechtels, two brothers, Harry and Otto, and five sisters, Rose, Bess, Emma, Mildred, and Tilly. Schechtels were extroverts, informal, and street smart. Marcuses were introverted and reserved. The two families were not only dissimilar, they had absolutely nothing in common. And so, fate decided to amuse itself. Harry Schechtel married Pauline Marcus. Otto Schechtel married Natalie Marcus. Tilly Schechtel married Al Marcus. And if that were not enough, Sam Marcus married Pauline's best friend. It was a marital feeding frenzy. Otto's older brother Harry was the most formidable member of the Schechtel clan. He was 5'10", muscular and powerful, with a commanding personality. If we had been Italian, he would have been the consigliere. He was the one that Otto and the others went to for advice. Harry and Pauline had 4 young boys, Seymour, Eddie, Howard, and Steve. Seymour was only 6 months older than I, but he always seemed older than his age. In the Marcus family, Al was the charmer, good-looking and amusing, the family bon vivant. He liked to gamble and flirt. Sam Marcus was the solemn elder statesman who disapproved at the Schechtels' lifestyle. Sam's business was running checkroom concessions in various Chicago hotels. Sometimes when my uncles got together, they would go into a corner and talk about a mysterious thing called sex. It sounded powerful. I prayed that it wouldn't go away before I grew up. Otto was a spendthrift who enjoyed throwing money around, whether he had it or not. He would often invite a dozen guests to an expensive restaurant, and when the bill came, borrow the money from one of them to pay the tab. Natalie could not stand borrowing or owing money. She had a strong sense of responsibility. As I grew older, I began to realize how totally unsuited they were for each other. My mother was miserable, married to a man she had no respect for, living an inner life that he would not understand. My father had married a fairy tale princess only to find himself bewildered when the honeymoon ended. They argued constantly, but these were not for no normal arguments. They were bitter and vicious. They found each other's weak points and tore at them. The arguing became so savage that I would run out of the house to the public library, where I escaped to the peaceful and serene worlds at the Hardy Boys and Tom's Sweet books. One day, when I got home from school, Otto and Natalie were screaming obscenities at each other. I decided I couldn't stand it any longer. I needed help. I went to my aunt Pauline, Natalie's sister. She was sweet, loving dumpling of a woman, pragmatic and intelligent. I knew exactly what he was thinking. My father was a salesman. He was going to try to talk to me out of my plan, but he didn't have a chance. Or I knew what I was going to do. I said, "All right, put on the coat. You don't want to catch cold." The irony of that made me smile. 5 minutes later, my father and I headed down windswept streets that were empty of pedestrians because of the freezing temperature. After a long silence, my father said, "Tell me about it, son. Why do you want to commit suicide?" Where could I begin? How could I explain to